Hello, fellow test takers. Now, I'm recovering from the worst cold I've had in decades, so my apology in advance for any coughs or throat clearings that sneak in. I'm Justin from Free-Clep-Prep, and today we're going to talk about the College Composition CLEPs. That's plural because there are two of them, which causes a lot of confusion for people. First, you have the College Composition CLEP, which has around 50 multiple choice questions and then requires you to write 2 essays. This is the version that most colleges will want you to take to satisfy an English requirement. The second version is called College Composition Modular and includes about 95 multiple choice questions, but there are no essay requirements for this one. Most colleges will grant you credit for this, but it often won't satisfy a requirement for an actual English course. As always, I suggest you check with your college before taking either exam so you don't waste your time or your money. Just know that whenever you hear people say College Composition CLEP, that's probably referring to the one that requires you to write essays. I took that one about a month ago and scored a 70. So I wanted to talk about the essays, but let's talk about the multiple choice portion first because these aren't your normal questions and it trips up a lot of people. I usually finish CLEPs in half the given time because I'm a fast reader and I actually study for these things. For this CLEP, though, I had less than 8 minutes remaining for the multiple choice section. It was tight. The good news is that multiple choice sections are the same in both versions. There are just more of them on the College Composition Modular to compensate for the lack of essays. Looking at the fact sheet, it's easy to get intimidated before you even take the exam. But here's what all this boils down to. They want to make sure that you have a decent grasp of the English language, including grammar and punctuation. They want you to be capable of putting together sentences in a way that makes sense to readers, whoever's reading what you're writing. They want to know if you can understand citations and references, and they want to make sure you understand what authors are trying to say, even if they don't come out and say it plainly. Underneath all that fancy terminology, that's all they're going to be testing you on, so don't let it stress you out. Let's give some examples. All of these come from the official CLEP site, and I'll include a link for this document below. This is a really helpful document. I'm glad they included it. For the Conventions of Standard Written English section, like you'll see on the actual exam, you'll see questions like this one. If there's an error, select the text in bold that must be changed to make the sentence correct. If there's no error, select no error. Simple, right? And then they have the actual sentence. This section was one of the easier ones for me. I read the sentence and then I stop whenever the train runs off the track. In this case, one of the greatest athletes that the United States ever produced was Jim Thorpe. Makes sense. So I can probably eliminate A and B as the answer. Continuing, we get who was the first winning gold medals. Now, wait a second. Jim Thorpe wasn't a winning, so that doesn't make any sense. If they'd have said who was the first to win gold medals, that would have been better. My answer in this case is D. Here's another. Try and figure it out for yourself this time. Again, this one is D because they used neither and it should be nor, not or. I like this example because the problem isn't as glaring as the first one. If you can't spot anything after the first read-through, start thinking about punctuation and grammar rules, such as this one, on your second read-through. If you just can't spot anything, don't be afraid just to hit the no error choice and move on. It's easy to spend all your time reading on this exam and come up short at the end, and that's one of the things we want to avoid at all costs. The revision skills section is next and is by far the most annoying portion for me personally. That's due to two things. First, because this section can really eat up your time if you're not careful. We'll talk about some tips to deal with that in just a minute. The second reason is that I felt many of the questions were subjective. They'll ask you to improve a sentence, but you might feel that 2 or more answers would actually work. I'm just mentioning this because I don't want you agonizing over which answer is the most correct and wasting time. If you run into something like that, just go with your gut and pick one, then move on to the next question. You can mark it as for a review later on if you have some time, but just pick it and then move on. Let's go over some examples for this section. They'll give you a sentence like this and then ask you to pick the better version. A lot of air quotes. To revise the state science standards is complicated. It involves a lengthy review process and an appointment of the committee of educators. This one isn't that bad. Looking at the sample sentence, it's 2 complete thoughts. To revise the state science standards is complicated, and it involves a lengthy review process and appointment of a committee of educators. Both of those are separated by a comma. So either of those could be a sentence on its own, so I would replace that comma with a semicolon or a transition word like because. It's an obvious problem. So let's see how they fixed it in the answers. The first is the same as the sample, so that one's out. The second answer changed a few words, most notably, it involves to involving, making the second thought clearly dependent on the first and solving our comma problem. That's probably going to be our answer, but I'm going to look at the others just to make sure. C, D, and E have various problems, mostly missing punctuation, so B looks like the correct answer. The reason I kept reviewing answers even after seeing B is that sometimes you'll have another correct answer, like the semicolon I'd put there. Then you have to decide which is the most correct. It's frustrating, but make sure you review all the questions. Just don't spend too much time doing so. You're also probably seeing the time issue. You probably looked at the question 2 or 3 times, right? This CLEP will have you looking at the question, then the first answer, then the question again, and then the next answer, then the question again, over and over and over again. And this is what eats up a lot of your time. It's not bad on these short questions, but here's where the revision section gets nasty, because you'll also have questions like this one. You can spend a lot of time on questions like this. Here's my advice. Don't read the text right away. Instead, skip to the question and find the sentence it's asking about and jump directly to that sentence. You're going to be doing that anyway, so just do it first. In this case, it's sentence 5. This is the making of the Navajo code talkers. Now, all we do is find the best revision for that sentence. See if you can spot it given our choices here. If you said E, you're correct. C was grammatically correct, but it wasn't as clear. They formed themselves, and what important reasons. So E was the better choice. I keep putting these things in air quotes because you'll run into this a lot on this exam. Look for the best answer, which might not be only the correct answer. After the revision section, the source materials will probably come as a welcome dose of sanity. This part is straightforward. It's just testing your knowledge on citations and some common sense questions about what type of references you use under certain circumstances. Okay, that's straightforward enough if you understand citations. The answer is B. Now the question is, did you skip directly to the question or did you read the entire excerpt first? If you didn't skip straight to the question, you only get half credit for this one. Get in the habit now. Just some personal thoughts on this section. I'd spend some time making sure you have citations down. Know what a citation looks like on books versus journals versus websites. I'd be able to do that for MLA and APA at the minimum. The rest of the section is common sense type questions like what kind of reference makes the most sense in a particular situation. The citations are where I'd spend most of my time studying. Lastly, we have the rhetorical analysis portion, which is basically a mini version of the analyzing and interpreting literature CLEP. You'll be asked to determine what the author is trying to say, or how an audience might interpret certain sentences. Here's an example for you. You read the question first, right? I'm going to keep helping on this until it becomes second nature for you. The correct answer in this case is B. How I usually answer this type of question is simply a true-false check against each answer. A is false because sentence 2 isn't asking us to evaluate anything. B is true on both counts, so it is a correct answer. A correct answer. I checked the rest because it might not be the only correct answer. Answer D could probably be considered correct, but this isn't a surprising phenomenon, so B is still the better choice. All right, this one is running long, but let's talk about those essays. It's the part that scares a lot of people, and I completely understand where they're coming from, which is why I created this free tool on Free-Clep-Prep. I'm going to use it to walk you through the essay portion, but please log in and use it yourself for some practice if you like. It's free for everybody. The College Composition CLEP, not the Modular, has 2 different essays. The first is a persuasive or argumentative, if you're feeling argumentative, essay that will give you a statement and require you to either agree or disagree. It's your choice which way to go, but you'll have to provide reasons for whatever stance you take. The second essay is a synthesis essay. This will give you two different sources and then ask you to include those sources or synthesize them into a single essay supporting your position on whatever topic they give you. This is where that citation study comes in, because you're expected to cite both of those sources correctly while also using them to bolster your position in the essay. Before we get to actually writing the essay, let's look at how these are graded. You can find this on the exam fact sheet, which I'll link below. The important takeaway is that each exam is graded with a score of 0 to 6, with 6 being the best score possible. They're incredibly helpful here, and they show us exactly what we need to get to that score of 6. It's pretty straightforward, even if the definition of many of these are going to be up to the person grading the test. Some of it's going to be subjective, but we can take away some things though. We want our ideas to be developed thoroughly, with examples or details to support it. We can't simply say things and expect the person that's reading it to agree with them. We need proof, even if it's anecdotal. It needs to be well organized. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's easier than you probably think. You can stretch your vocabulary muscles here. Dropping in words like anecdotal will help your cause as long as you use it correctly. Your grammar is important, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I misuse commas, flub transitions, and have loving relationships with run-on sentences. I still pass this, and so can you. Okay, now let's go ahead and get to writing. I'm going to walk you through this, so no worries there. We'll tackle the persuasive essay first. You'll get something like this example here, either in the form of a question or a statement. Your job is to pick a side, either positive or negative, and stick to that side. Remember the grading guidelines. We want to be clear with our position, have well thought out reasons why it's the correct one with examples, and have it clearly organized so it's hard to argue with. If you click on the Show Hints button, you'll see some other things to keep in mind while writing your essay. These hints will actually close when you start writing, and you won't have them on the actual exam, but I wanted to be helpful, so let's review them now before we begin. The paragraph structure is what I'd like you to focus on right now. This is the structure I use for almost every writing assignment I run into. You can use it for both essays and even for other exams, such as the Principles of Public Speaking DSST. The format is simple. 1 paragraph for the introduction, 2 to 3 paragraphs making your argument, and then another for the conclusion. Both the introduction and the conclusion paragraphs you're going to see are basically writing themselves, so the body paragraphs are the only ones that will require some real thinking. Easy enough. Okay, now here we go. I don't pretend to be the world's best writer, so I'm hoping you can see my mistakes in all their glory here. I do have Grammarly installed, so you'll probably see some of those lines pointing out all the mistakes that I make. We don't actually have those on the real test, so I'm ignoring them if I don't spot the errors myself. As you can see, the introduction almost writes itself. All we're doing here is restating the statement and picking our side. This is a trick you can use for any writing assignment, and it really helps pad your word count. Make sure you pick your side in the introduction and state it clearly, usually towards the end. Now, people always ask, what if I don't have a strong opinion either way? That's okay. Just pick a side and roll with it. You're writing this for the audience, not for yourself. I like electric cars because I'm a geek and I think the technology is cool, but I'm not blind to their cons, though. I don't think they're like a magic bullet for the world's problems. But that doesn't matter for this essay. For this essay, I'm electric cars' #1 fan, and I think oil is bad and is choking our planet. Fight me. Paragraphs 2 through 5 are our body paragraphs. I was on a roll for paragraph 2 and then 3, but then realized around paragraph 4 that I was just talking about the vehicles rather than the climate. So I tried to tie that in a bit with paragraphs 4 and 5. Paragraph 6 is our conclusion, and again, it's just repeating things that we've already said. I like to point out at least 1 or 2 of the arguments I've made and then come up with a closing sentence or 2 that everyone should be able to get on board with. In this case, it's a brighter future for our kids. Who doesn't want a brighter future for our kids? If I have time left, I'll go through and read the entire essay again, looking for any spelling or punctuation errors that I missed on the first go-round. For example, internal combustible engines instead of combustion. There's a ton more of that Grammarly pointed out that I just missed myself, and that's okay. As I said before, I'm not the world's best writer. They're not asking you to be. They just want you to be good enough to get your ideas across and show you're taking the assignment seriously. So that wasn't so bad, was it? You can do the exact same thing. Just run through the tool a few times, and you'll be able to tackle the real thing with no sweat. Okay, let's hit the synthesis essay next. This one trips up a lot of people because you're supposed to synthesize the 2 sources, even though they're opposing viewpoints a lot of the times. Just remember that synthesizing doesn't mean agreeing with. I'll often use one of the sources as an example of the opposing viewpoint, and then offer my own rebuttal. This is also where knowledge of citations comes into play. I cannot stress enough that you need to be able to cite sources correctly. You'll notice in our essay writer tool that we have badges that tells you if something is a magazine or a journal, website, book, etc. These are here to help you practice, and those aren't available during the actual test. You'll need to determine how to cite the source based on the information you're given in a reference. So a book is cited differently than a website. Just know the difference. Whether you use APA, MLA, or other formats, know how to do in-text citations for every type of publication you might run into. That's the hard part. That's the stuff that I really want you to spend some time nailing down. It'll help you, I promise. Okay, let's go ahead and start on this one. We have 40 minutes and we're going to use the same format with our paragraphs, writing an intro, 2 to 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And as you can see, the intro is the same as before. We're simply restating the statement and then picking a side. I almost didn't follow my own advice here, but it's easy enough to tack on at the end. The next paragraph is where we're acknowledging the other side of the argument and providing a rebuttal. One of the things I actually like about the synthesis essay is that by quoting the source, I'm able to pad my word count by quite a bit. I didn't use the entire quote here, and you should know that most of the quotes you'll see on the actual test are shorter than our examples, but I'd still make use of those free words when you can. Quote them, and then cite them. I'm using MLA here, but use whichever you're comfortable with. Reading back over this while I'm recording the video, I probably should have used his full name instead of simply Dr. Walsh. Another change I'd likely have made since I had so much time was to bring the first 2 sentences of the next paragraph to the end of this one. You want to end the paragraph with a firm stance, and mine is a little bit weak. Don't waffle between the 2 sources. Pick your side and stick to it. The third paragraph is for our side of the argument. As I mentioned, I should have started this with, thankfully, other learned individuals agree with me. I also just realized that I misspelled is in the second quote. Oops. Hopefully I'd have caught that on a second or third pass. The fourth paragraph is more about driving my point home that television can be a good thing. I'd have probably polished this a bit more and added more firmness to the argument. I think it's kind of weak in its current form, but that's what the time is at the end of the essays. The final paragraph is just a conclusion, and again, I'm repeating what has already been said and trying to make it relatable to the reader. As you can see, the essays don't have to be perfect in order for you to pass. Now, granted, I didn't put a whole lot of effort here, but I was more concerned with speed than winning a Pulitzer Prize. Get through your first draft as fast as you can, and then you can spend your remaining time polishing it. The worst thing that you can possibly do is sit there staring at a blank screen for a large chunk of your time. Get some words down and then make them shine. It is rare that people don't walk out of this test feeling like the biggest enemy was the timer. I know I did. I had about 2 minutes left on the first essay and less than a minute on the second. Even the multiple choice portions took me longer than usual. The only way to deal with that is practice. So please run through a practice essay or 2. Now, a quick word about when you can expect your score. If you're taking the modular exam, you'll likely get your score immediately after the exam is finished, just like a normal CLEP. If you're taking the College Composition CLEP, the one with the essays, those are only graded on certain days. You can see those on this page, which I'll link down below again. For example, if we took our exam on February 8th, 2026, we'd fall into this row here and could expect our scores to be visible on College Board by February 15th and probably sent to our schools by February 23rd. All right, that's all, folks. This video ran a lot longer than I was expecting, so for those of y'all still around, thank you for giving me your time and attention. I hope this helps you go into the exam with more confidence. You can find more resources, practice tests, and the essay writing tool at Free-Clep-Prep, and I'll have links in the description for everything you've seen here. Now go get those credits. You can do this. See you later.